Well, hello. Welcome to the Creative Writing Life podcast, where we talk with writers from all mediums and genres about themselves, their work, and advice they have for writers. I'm your host, Paul Zeidman, and my guest today is Dr. Bruce Farmer. I'm going to read the bio that's in his book, Blood, Sapphire's Revenge. That's what we're going to be talking about today. So bear with me for a second while I find the right page in here, Bruce. It's in the back. Here we go. With a life as diverse and thrilling as an epic adventure novel, Dr. Bruce Farmer has traversed the globe and delved into myriad careers. From the rugged peaks of the Cascades to the bustling streets of Portland, Oregon, now in Atlanta or northern Georgia, we just talked about that, his journey has been nothing short of extraordinary. An intrepid outdoorsman, Bruce finds solace and inspiration in the wild, scaling mountains and carving through snowy slopes. His passion for nature seeps into the pages of his novel, Blood, Sapphire's Revenge, infusing his characters with the essence of the great outdoors. Did you write that?
No, that was Rick. Rick Light did that. My original bio was more lengthy. It went
Okay.
through edits after edits after to kind of get it down.
Hmm.
But Rick just because the original bio talked about medical school
Mm.
and surgery and all of that stuff, and Rick went, "Nah, we're good." Anyway. It was great. It's
Okay,
good.
and that is Rick Light of Stress Free Book Marketing, a recent guest on the show. So, Dr. Bruce Farmer, welcome to the Creative Writing Life podcast.
Well, it's great. Great to be here.
Oh,
Really great.
my pleasure. And as regular listeners and viewers of the show are familiar, we like to start things off talking about something we may have read or watched. And I'll go first just to give Bruce a little time to gather his thoughts. So I watched I had never heard of this movie before, but local cinema it was playing it. It is a restored version of it's called The Small Back Room, and I believe it's from 1949, and it is a Powell Pressburger production, so it's set in the UK, and it's during the war, and it is about a bomb expert who, of course, has a drinking problem because it wouldn't be a Powell Pressburger movie without some kind of thing and some kind of scene with him going through the DTs, as they wrote in the
Yeah,
description. And
yeah.
it was good. It was a little slow at points, but I enjoyed it, and it's in black and white, so double points for me. But I enjoyed it, and it took me a while to try and find information about it online. Like it's not even on IMDb, which was a total shock. So hopefully
Yeah, yeah.
hopefully they'll be able to rectify that. Bruce, what about you? Anything interesting, or I do not want to see that again in the reading or writing cues?
Well, I've not heard of that movie, and I haven't watched that movie. Um, I I am a fan of classic movies going back to the Eisenstats of, the 1915,
Wow. Okay.
Pumpkin,
Sure.
and,
Sure.
and watching the black and whites of Alfred Hitchcock, especially the one where we've got the stranger. And I don't know if you've seen that. Everything was black and white with Hitchcock, and it was silent.
Oh,
But
okay. Oh, that's really early Hitchcock.
the way he did it was pure. I mean, the girl goes into her upstairs apartment and she lays down in her bed. The one window that you look out of, you look across the street at Gilby's Gin building. And
Hmm.
this is like 1923. And it's at night. And there is a neon sign of a cocktail glass that's going chick, chick, back and forth, like going from the 10 o'clock to the 2 o'clock position, like in bright red. And you see this Gilby's Gin, and she lays down behind a curtain, kind of like a hospital, but that was how you created space.
Sure.
And in steals the guy who is going to do her harm. And so she doesn't know that he's in there. He's creeping across, and suddenly he's diving into or putting his hands through the curtain. Now, by her bedside is a table with a thing of bread and cheese and a big carving
Knife,
knife.
of course.
And so her hand is flailing out and in. out of the curtain, in, out, as she's struggling, and you're seeing the Gilby's gin going tick, 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 and suddenly her hand finds the thing, and suddenly the knife is going boom, boom, boom. It was, well, to this day, I remember it. And it was
Yeah.
silent. You didn't have to say anything. He he directed things so well.
Hmm.
So I loved, I I really like Hitchcock.
Oh, well, there's
Yeah.
just so much to like. I mean, it's
Yeah.
brilliant filmmaking and your characters and story, but
Yeah.
that's a whole other show for another topic. So, Bruce, let's talk a little bit about you. So, you are a doctor. So, how did you get your start as a writer?
Well, I had started writing in high school and then put it down and took up a career in medicine. And for 50 years, in in Jungian terms, I lived under the sun. When we live under the sun, we are in the productive mode. We're we're making a way for our family. We're
Mhm.
earning a living. And in my case, my dad was a veterinary doctor, but he was in the army. In the army, because of he was an AOA grad and a real brainiac, they moved him into the top secret nuclear physics program, and he ended up on Area 51 and was there with the testing of above ground explosions, and the radiation would, fall out onto cattle. He and the sergeant would go out and, you know, do all of those sections. And so some of the very first studies we have of the effects of nuclear radiation on living tissue, on flesh, is something that he wrote. It's all secret to
Right.
this day. But so I was living out this in again Jungian terms. I really like Carl Jung, living that out. And then in the year 2000, I got all I can say is the vision for this book.
Hmm.
So 24 years ago. And I remember explaining what this vision was to this art professor at the college I was teaching. I was an associate professor of science and theology, and this was in LA. And she looked at me. She was part of a movie family. And she said, if you can maintain your focus, if you can hold on to this and actually write this, this will be a movie someday. Now, that was back 24 years ago.
Mhm.
Well, I kind of wrote a little bit, then put it down, but basically, I was a physician. And in 2016, I had a business in I developed a program for rehabbing severely injured bats, and was working with Oregon Health Sciences University and with grant money and all of that, and it all fell through.
Oh, wow.
And I had to, you have to close up shop.
Mhm.
And I didn't know what to do. And so I sought the advice of a senior counselor, a Carl Jungian counselor from Zurich. Her name is Martha Blake. And I said, Martha, I explained my situation. I said, the only thing I have is a dream. Well, of course, with the Jungians, if you say you have a dream, I mean, that's like, okay, she gets out her pad and pencil, like, I'm ready.
I'm listening.
And I, I had, I saw Robert Frost, and he was laying on his back in a cold, clear mountain stream. and the stream was flowing over him and it had iced over. So he was alive. He reminded me of a fish that was trying to survive. He wanted out and his hands were on the ice. And the moon was coming up, and the moonlight was starting to melt the edges of this river. And so Martha, in her way, because she was really amazing, she said, "Have you ever written poetry?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I mean, 50 years ago,
Mhm.
you know." Uh-huh. Well, maybe there's a poet in you that wants to get out. Are you writing anything at the moment? I said, "Well, funny you should ask. I've started picking up Blood Sapphire's Revenge. It was just in a formative stage." She said, "Well, maybe that's the direction your subconscious, the unconscious is saying 50 years under the sun is enough. It's now time to move in under the moonlight.
Mm.
This is art. This is literature, and you're going to have to change the way you think about things, everything, pivot." And that's how I started writing full time.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
What was the inspiration for the story? I mean, was it kind of like were you a big fan of that kind of genre? And also, if you want to give like a quick pitch slash log line for the book, so people have a better understanding of what it's about.
Well, Staff Sergeant, well, let me give the vision first. I had left medicine. I trained in surgery and I worked in emergency. I did emergency medicine for years. Loved it. And but at the end about 1998, 99, I started feeling this call to leave medicine and pursue this question I had, which was a philosophical, theological question about determinism and free will. Um, if God is sovereign, if there's determinism, how can humans have free will? And this has been a question in philosophy, theology for thousands of years. I thought I'd give it a shot. Anyway, I was in seminary, not to be a pastor, but to get depth in philosophical theology. And I was reading the book of Esther in the Old Testament. And here's the story of this orphan named Hadassah. And her guardian is Mordecai, and they're Jews, and they're in the Persian. This is Xerxes time, 5th century BC, and the he's this is the world power. This is the empire, and as it turns out, he's looking for a bride, and his advisors say, "Send out the word. Let's find the most beautiful virgins in the kingdom, and you'll find one." Well, as it turns out, he chooses Hadassah, and Mordecai has simply said, "Don't tell Artaxerxes that about your race. You're an orphan. Just keep it that way." Well, as it turns out, in Esther, there's an enemy that rises up who wants who has an animus against Jews and wants to kill the entire race. And he gets permission, the okay from Artaxerxes, to kill them all on a certain day, throwing lots. And word comes to Mordecai, and this goes throughout the kingdom, and everyone is completely confused and terrified. And Mordecai sends word to Esther and says, "You need to talk. to Xerxes. She hasn't heard anything about this because she's in the palace. She
Hmm.
says, "What's going on?" He explains it. He says, "Well, you need to do this." And she says, to walk in unannounced in front of the king is there's only one sentence, and that's death. Unless he extends the golden scepter, I'm dead. And Mordecai says a line which for me has riveted my soul for years and years and years. He says, maybe you were born for such a time as this. In other words, you know, maybe you will die, but perhaps you're in a place of God's choosing and you need to step up to the plate. She does, and the Jews are delivered, and there's a holiday that's celebrated every year called Purim. But I'm reading this and I suddenly have this thought. What would it be like to take that 5th century Persian queen and move her into our time and make her a spec ops Israeli sniper, maybe one of the finest of 7 snipers in the world at the time. Let's make her a spec ops sniper, an elite sniper, who bring her into this time, and she's given a mission to kill an Al Qaeda terrorist, this number 2 in Yemen. And as it turns out, she makes this a shot that's a record-setting shot. No. And she does not know that this Al Qaeda terrorist has a sponsor in a Ukrainian um, oligarch of great, great power and wealth who's friends with Putin. He and Putin are buddies.
Hmm.
And when he hears that this terrorist has been, his friend has been killed, he says, find her. He tells his enforcer, find her. I want her to die a bloody death. Take care of it. He doesn't know that 27 years earlier, he had killed her father. Hattie, this is Staff Sergeant Hattie Abrams after Hadassah,
Hmm.
has been looking all her life for the man who killed her father.
Yeah. And that is the starting point for the story.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I did read it, and it's a high octane story. There's a lot of slam bang action, but it's also uh, what I really liked is that there's so many different storylines going on at the same time, and you start to plant the seeds. You know, okay, this happened at this point in time. We're going to have it pay off later, and that they all of these storylines start to slowly weave together, that they intersect, and like there's this connection to that one, and but you forgot about that one, but this one's connected to that guy over there.
Yeah.
So I think the big question is, so how was it putting the whole story together? Did you focus on Hattie's character first and then kind of think, okay, if she knows this guy, then he can know this person over there, and they're connected to here and here, like a big map with all like kind of dotted
Yes.
lines going back and forth?
It's funny. I started with Hattie and I
Hmm.
started constructing a story around her, but very quickly she was facing off against this nameless oligarch. And I just felt like, okay, she had a mother who was involved in this somehow. And then suddenly I was thinking, I need to have had, there needs to be a third woman in this mystery thriller.
Hmm.
And I was reading chapter by chapter to Martha Blake. And I said, Martha, I just have this, not a compulsion, but it's not just about Hattie. It's about these three women who are tied together by blood, and they're going after this guy, even though they don't know. And she said, well, that's Fitcher's bird. And I said, what? She said, you know, that's a grim fairy tale. This is an archaic theme that you find throughout cultures. And in Fitcher's bird, you've got three gals. There's the mother, there's three gals, and Fitcher is a really creepy guy, like a troll, who captures one and takes it to the castle, and then he kills that one and captures another, and is going to kill that one. And it's the third one, in this case, would be Hattie, who goes to the castle understanding my mother and my sister have gone in there and haven't come out. Something isn't right. And so she's the one that figures out how to remove Fitcher and free her sisters. And I went, you're kidding. She says, no, your psyche is working out this story of Fitcher's bird. And I went, that is amazing. So, in fact, I started writing about Hattie, and suddenly I developed a story about her mother and then her father. And then one thing led to another. And it just started to take shape. And the key thing is that this oligarch is Jewish and he hates his race. He's determined to annihilate the Jews, just like in the book of Esther. And this is based on Kaganovich, who was the exterminator for Stalin. Kaganovich was a Jew who killed masses and thousands of Jews. So this guy, X, and his actions, is he's called X, is
Mm.
really based on a real life character in the time of Stalin. So what he's doing is he's developing plutonium, uh, basically Hellfire missiles with plutonium bombs in them, a core plutonium, but they're smaller, they're man portable. And so he's developing man portable nuclear rockets that will be used to annihilate Jerusalem.
Mm.
And so I went, okay, we need a protagonist here. The protagonist is Francois Lecomte. He's the French professor, the near to the Nobel Prize in plutonium physics. He's designing something having to do with plutonium that's never been done before. And as it turns out, um, we have then the nuclear element.
Hmm.
And so one thing leads to another. And suddenly, X, the Ukrainian oligarch, has to fire his guys and ends up kidnapping, if you will,
Hmm.
Francois to get the job done. And that leads to another thing. So the story builds. So you have Hattie as well. The other, her, there's this tension because she has a love interest.
Hmm.
And 9 years earlier, she'd been on Mount Rainier, part of a group of folks that were climbing the mountain under. When you climb Rainier or big mountains, you have these groups and
Right.
they pull people in from all over the world and you gather and you do it. And on this climb, she's coming down the mountain and crossing this crevasse. Now, I've been on those crevasses and they are massive. They go down, you can't see the bottom of them, and you're crossing on these aluminum ladders
Mm.
that we see. And so there you are going clank, 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 holding on for dear life. She's coming down, and Wolf James, who is a first sergeant ranger, who is just about ready to retire as a master sergeant, he and his buddies are climbing Mount Rainier as well. They're going up while Hattie and her group is coming down. And at that moment, as they pass each other, and when you climb, you go past people in the middle of the night and they're just, 6 inches that way.
Hmm.
You're not paying attention to anyone. You're just trying to survive here. But in this moment, the sunlight is coming up and they catch each other's eyes. And they know beyond knowing that that is their soulmate.
Mm.
And Wolf wants to turn back, and his buddies have to move him on. And Hattie wants to turn back, but she's part of a group
Hmm.
roped in, and she has to continue. And Wolf is spends 9 years trying to find the woman on the mountain,
Mm.
who is Hattie Abrams.
Okay. Well, we
And
don't want
he,
to give away too many
okay,
details about the
sorry,
story.
sorry.
That's
Anyway,
okay.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, so did you? I want to get back to the old like plotting out the story. Did you okay? Did you kind of know what Hattie's story was going to be? But as the story developed, you have, as you said, all of these different supporting characters and these like A, or you have Hattie's the A story. You have all like the B story and the C story.
Yeah.
Did you develop those as you went along, or did you kind of think, okay, here's a really strong character like Professor Lecomte? So, okay, what could his backstory be? Okay, I need to have one or two chapters setting him up and then kind of tying him into the main story. Was it just a whole kind of like, I'm going to start with Hattie and take it from there? Or like, okay, I have this story, this story, this story. How can I start to weave those together?
I when I write, I don't know where I'm going to end up.
Oh, okay.
And this was a Louis L'Amour. He said to his granddaughter when she said to him, "Grandpa, why are you writing?" He was at the typewriter. "What are you writing about?" He says, "I don't know.
Yeah.
I'll find out." I
Hmm.
mean, that's kind of how I write. I start with an idea about what Hattie has to do, where she has to be, like the sniper shot. The
Hmm.
first chapter is devoted to that. So I spent basically a year in terms of researching
Mm.
the Macmillan and the sniper shot and the software. And it's, so that when I finally had her equipped and ready to make the shot and how to get there, then I'm faced with, okay, what next?
Mm. Sure.
So then I developed the village of Shib, and the chief, and he's got the Stinger missiles, and one
Hmm.
thing leads to another. And finally, they escape from they nearly die in that one. But so I pursue these characters. It really is character driven because Hattie, her flaw, um, Tolstoy said there are one of two ways a story can go. Either a stranger comes into a town or you leave on an adventure.
Hmm.
It's one or the other.
Yep.
In this case, it's Hattie who will be summoned to leave. She'll be summoned to go on an adventure not of her choosing. And her flaw, because every character has a major fatal flaw. Uh, Susan Atwell said, when you have your protagonist on the edge of a cliff, push him over. Never let up. Push that character to the extremes because that's where you're going to find your audience. They don't care that she can shoot a gun. Put a gun in her hand and have it misfire, have it not work. and have a tank coming, and then she's got to run, and one thing leads to another, but she's on the run, and in fact, that's what happens here. So, um, Hattie is doing what she does, and then suddenly you have to go, okay, where are we going to go from here? And that's how I do these things.
Okay. No, that's great stuff. I mean that, yeah, because stories are conflict, and it's,
Yeah,
nobody wants to see a story where everything works out for everybody because that's boring.
yeah,
So you need to have, okay, here's your main character, your protagonist, and what happens if the things do not go according to plan. And that's what people are more interested in.
right.
And so like, okay, she kills this guy, and then so what happens as a result of that? Well, she's got to do this. Okay, what happens when she does that? Well, this suddenly happens, and now she's got to do that. So there's a lot of that throughout the whole story, but not just for her, but for almost every character,
Yeah. I
including those on the antagonist side.
I I love Shakespeare, and what Shakespeare can do, with Macbeth or whatever, what he can do in a few scenes, he can take you from the worst. He can surprise you at every turn. You're never quite sure, if you've never seen the play, what's going to happen.
Hmm.
And well, the fatal flaw with Hattie is she is freighted with an existential angst about the meaninglessness of life. And there are folks out there who have a sense that life is or has no meaning. And they say, why should I continue to live? And this is not clinical depression as we think about clinical depression and we treat with Paxil or Zoloft or Prozac. This is an existential thing that some people feel intensely, and that is her fatal flaw. She is at a point where she does not want to repeat her 27th birthday because on her birthday her father was murdered, and she's saying, I am going to kill myself. I'm not facing that. That's so she's the one who must leave the village and go on an adventure, but she leaves with this. That is her fatal flaw. How will she deal with the fact that she's planning to kill herself after this amazing shot? She says, that's fine, but I don't need to be here anymore. So that sets up the one of the first big moments.
Hmm.
Well, I think a lot of the moments are big, but this is where she finds a place up in the Benjamin forest that's very isolated, and she is going to commit, harikiri,
Hmm.
seppuku, and she's ready with the knife, to the tanto blade, to cut her throat. And I won't divulge what happens,
I
other
would, I
than,
would hope not. That's
yeah,
called a spoiler, and we try to
yeah,
avoid those.
yeah, yeah. So we'll just leave it at that. But
Okay, so you raised two good points. I want to get to the research one in a little bit, but you have a lot of moments throughout the story of many of the characters, especially Hattie and Wolf and LeCompte and other characters. There's a lot of self-reflection, like reflected via an inner monologue. Now, was that something you wanted to include, or was it kind of develop as you were working on the story? Okay, like here's this character, and it's rather than just describing what it is they're doing, you have it kind of like an internal explanation for them, but
yeah,
I think which is also for the benefit of the reader.
yes, I I have to give credit, and I'm trying to think of the author's name. Um, it's what's the name of that book? Um, I'm blanking
Well,
on
that is the vaguest question I think I've ever been asked. What's that book
it.
about again?
No, he was the one who said there are four levels of inner dialogue
Hmm.
that each individual must go through. He said, going back to Hattie with a gun, she's got a gun and she's about ready to shoot someone. That's the first level. The second level is, you know, is it right or wrong? What is the moral yes and the moral no?
Hmm.
Number three is who is it in your family that would be affected by this decision? So she's about ready to pull the trigger on an Al Qaeda terrorist. Fine. Okay. That's good in the sense that that guy is a bad guy. Um, but in a sense, I'd say, so what? There
Hmm.
are a lot of people with guns and a lot of bad people. So what? The the question is, Hattie is someone who's thinking about that and then takes it another step. What would my mother think of these hands that she gave birth to me? What would she be thinking now? I'm about, would she be holding me in her arms and crying? And then there's a fourth stage, which is who is the hero or the kind of the authoritative voice who can speak into the situation? What would, now, of course, I like Winston Churchill.
Hmm.
What would Winston Churchill say? But let's take someone else. What would Joseph Stalin say about this act? You take people with very definite opinions and ask, okay, they're sitting in on Hattie as she's ready to pull the trigger. What would they say? And the author of this book makes the point that people don't care about the first level. Yeah, I got a gun and I shot the guy. He was a bad guy. Everyone goes, so what?
Hmm.
What touches a reader is when you ask that second, third, and fourth level, which is, what would my mother be thinking right now? What would my husband be doing? What would my neighbor be thinking about this? And what would, if someone was astride, if Nelson Mandela himself strode into this, what would he say about this? That suddenly the reader is being, they're thinking, asking questions of themselves. It's forcing the reader to be involved, not about shooting guns, but wow, what would I be? What would I do? So yes, I went through a whole thing where nearly every every scene, everyone had these four levels. And finally the editor, who really brought this into shape, said, hey, forget she would take all of this. I have so much that she just,
Hmm.
eliminated. Said, okay, we don't need that much self-reflection.
Yeah.
Keep that, save that, get rid of that. Otherwise you're going to bury the reader in, this is just too much.
Hmm.
So yeah, the editor just, she took me from 120,000 words. She said, there's no way, down to 90. She said, I want this at 90,000 words. And I'm going, uh, Catherine, you want me to get rid of 30,000 words? She said, yes, let me show you how.
Yeah.
And she removed whole chapters that
Hmm.
I'd spent like a year doing research on, Russia and its plutonium factories and all of this stuff and all of that. She just said, get rid of it.
Hmm. Yeah.
And so, anyway, so yeah, it
Well,
was
it's
that.
like that a lot because my thing is screenplay. So a lot of it, it's you have to do what's best for the story, not what's best for the writer. And
Yes,
so like this happens, this happens to me a lot. Like I have pages, I have scenes that I absolutely love, but does it contribute to the story? Does it keep the flow of the story going? Is it advancing the plot and the theme and the characters? And if it doesn't in any of those capacities, then out it goes. And yes, it breaks your heart, it twists the knife when you do it. But when you go back and read it again and it's not there, you don't even think, what happened to that scene that I
I
loved
know.
and I was so
Well,
proud of? Like you've just realized, wow, this story really reads well.
I uh in the middle of the book or at some point Hattie and Wolf will meet.
Of course.
And I construct the scene so that it's just, you know, anyway, it's a surprise after a surprise after a surprise. But to make it more intimate, I ended up doing research on erotica. How do you write, you know, erotica? And you know, I did months and months and months of research on that. And I constructed this chapter when they meet in this, I put all of my attention into making this the most salacious. And the editor went, yeah, that doesn't, that you have an advantage. Okay, you've shown me that you can write like this, but so what?
Hmm.
Have you advanced the plot, which is getting the bad guy?
Hmm.
No, you haven't. And she
Well,
got rid of all of it. I watched months and months and months of effort just go down the drain.
well, the thing is, at the time, it seems like a good idea, but then
Yes.
when you take a little step back and look at the big picture, you realize, okay, I love this, but I don't need it, and that is what we affectionately call killing one's darlings.
Yes, that's right.
Hmm.
Exactly.
Okay. So I really wanted to ask you that because it's a military thriller with some political ramifications as well, that there is a ton of information, especially on the military and the geopolitical aspect, that because you're saying you were doing so much research on all these different
Yeah.
aspects of the book, that like especially like okay, here's the type of rifle that Hattie uses, this is the kind of ammunition, here's the the computer program that the Lecomte is using, here's how the plutonium works. It was mind-blowing like how much research you must have done. I mean, you already said you spent so much time on different aspects of it. So were there times that, and this happens to a lot of writers, that you do more research than you actually need? So were you able to say, okay, I have this huge list of stuff that I can implement? Were you able to kind of like, okay, I need this, I don't need this, this is great, but it's not going to serve a point?
Well, I I've never been able to filter on the front end
Mm,
like that. I don't know what I don't know.
sure.
So when I was in medical school and we had to learn neuroanatomy and we were in dissecting brains, we also had to, be able to trace the tract of a certain cranial nerve. And I remember the professor asking me about this nerve, and I described to him in detail that because I'd read Gray's Anatomy and I'd memorized the exact description. And he looked at me and says, "You've gone way over the top, buddy.
Hmm.
You've gotten more than you need for what I need." And that's kind of it for the sniper scene. I didn't know what I didn't know. And so I really did spend probably a year in buying the books on snipers, reading about the books and the guns and and all of the stuff. The idea when she does the first shot and it goes over and above the terrorist a mile and a half away, well, that's from a true life story from that's one of the longest shots in history. Hathcock, I think was Hathcock, a Canadian, and this was in Afghanistan. He put in a shot that was like 2 miles away, which is unbelievable.
Hmm.
As they track the bullet, because you can count it 1001. I mean, this is just in flight. It went over the, there were two terrorists that were on a trail in this Afghan desert. I mean, miles away. They didn't hear the shot for
Mm,
seconds. The bullet goes beyond them and lands as a puff of dust. It's they're not even aware that they were shot at. He's able to reload and readjust before the sound wave hits those guys to alert them, and fires another one, and the second one strikes them both.
mm.
It was like Wow. Well, that's forms the basis for that first chapter and
Hmm.
how, I got the idea from reading that. And, you know, I mean, Hattie is formed from Elizabeth Salander and the girl with the dragon tattoo.
Sure.
She's a Elizabeth Salander inspiration as well as Jason Bourne. I love characters. Jason Bourne is a guy of phenomenal skill, but hey, guess what? I don't know who I am.
Right.
That's the question. If it's Jack Reacher, phenomenal skill, but he's lost whatever military thing. He's just wandering around. He's lost what it is to, the first half of his life is gone. Well, Elizabeth Salander she's an equation out of a whole nother thing. I mean, she's autistic. She's got all sorts of things going against her. But man, what a character.
Yeah.
And again, she's out to prove something. I'm not a freak because it's left to the author in the story. What's his name? Who loves her, the newspaper. And finally, says, finds herself falling in love with this guy because he tells her, Elizabeth, you're not a freak. I don't look at you that way. You are an extraordinary individual. You are just amazing. And she's never heard that before. She's lived in an environment where she's been put away in mental institution. She's been this and that. She's been all of those things. And she's been told time and again, you're a freak. You've got some special gifts. Yeah, like photographic memory and amazing, all of this stuff, but you're a freak.
Hmm.
Elizabeth is someone with tremendous ability, but trying to find this answer. Well, do I fit in this world? And she says she finds a place. Hattie's the same way, tremendous skills. Jeet Kune Do, the Bruce Lee thing, that's she was raised in, and then she does Krav Maga. She has the skills, but once we get past the suicide scene, uh, of course, there's a super twist in that
Hmm.
I that's kind of, but she will go ultimately, she will not be hunting the bad guy. Um, she will be trying to escape the enforcer, the guy
Hmm.
who's trying to, and in the process, she will be led into Wolf James. And in the process, the more she says, I'm not doing this, at some point, the director of the Mossad will call her at her lowest place and say, we are looking for this man called X, and we think you can find him. And she'll say, that is the stupidest thing I've ever heard of. You have the resources. You're the Mossad. I'm
Hmm.
just a staff sergeant, and I'm dead. I'm nearly dead from all the stuff. And yes, but for some reason, he seems to know where you are. Wherever you go, he's after you. Well, we want you to play the goat. We just want you to just stand still. And when he comes for you, we'll be there. And she says, that also, you're asking me just to be the goat. He says, yeah, there are worse things, but maybe you were born for this moment.
Hmm.
Maybe this, and to me, that question reverberates for every person who's listening right now, that we are all freighted with, in the Greeks, you have fate and destiny. Those are two in the classical Greek. You've got fate and fate is what the gods decree. That's the hand you're dealt. Those are the cards in your hand. Destiny is what you do with the cards is. So you can say, yeah, this is my fate. I was fated to be like this, but destiny is maybe you were born for this moment. You can take your situation and follow that instinct to go beyond yourself. You have a purpose in this life. You know, that's thrilling to me.
Okay. No, that's great stuff. So here's a really important question. Was it just fun to play with the elements of the story? Like you knew what kind of story it was going to be. This military espionage
Yeah,
thriller.
yeah.
Was it just kind of like, did you look forward to just putting your characters through all of this hell? And just kind of think, okay, what can I throw at them? What kind of twists can I come up with? And just kind of like, okay, and maybe you came up with something and thought, okay, this is not as extreme as I want it to be. I need to go back and like really, crank it up to 11.
Yes. Um, Kind of for me, the guiding principle was I want to come back to this story at some time in the future, read it and enjoy it.
Hmm.
I'm writing this because I like writing, and I'm writing it really for me because I just love the creative process and crafting this. So it was, it's just something that's born out of love, and it just every day you sit down and it's kind of like, what's happening now? Or some scenes I would just reflect on and meditate on and pray on days hiking. And have this thing tumbling in my head, you know, um, as not again, just a teaser, but Hattie will face off against God. And, you know, that's a tricky question. How far can you go in just making God the bad, bad, bad guy? Well,
Hmm.
she will push it. And I wanted to explore what that's like. And, that doesn't come easy. It took me days to work through. Wow, what kind of words are you putting in her mouth? But she will come to an aha moment. That's the very last line of the book.
Yeah,
That's
that's
yeah,
important for your character that you have to
yeah,
show them having some kind of change over the course of the
yes,
story. Because if there's no change, then that you're trying to say, okay, I'm going to have another book after this,
yeah.
and maybe something will happen. And so that brings up another question. So what is up next? I mean, is there another book in store, or do you just kind of think, okay, I have a new idea, new characters, totally new scenario?
I've started another book
Okay.
called Blood Sapphire's Fury,
Ah.
and it picks up from the moment revenge, the last page of Blood Sapphire's Revenge. It starts right there because we have a reveal really in the last page of that book as to another person like X, um, who has another a kind of world. I have it as a virus.
Ah. Okay.
I'm a doc, so I like
Sure.
biological things. And what's being done with viral technology is is amazing. So I've read books on the smallpox and all of these things, and you have people now that can design. We have designer smallpox, variola virus that you can splice into hantavirus and Ebola. You can create viral weapons of mass destruction. And this is really real.
Hmm.
So you can create viral agents now that have the ability to replicate and transmit through populations at this phenomenal rate with almost 80% lethality. So you introduce a little bit into the population of New York City, and it's not weeks. It's like a week goes by and the entire population is struck with this agent.
Hmm.
And it's not that you're struck, you're going to die. These things are actually again, I do the research and
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
there. So the second book starts with someone like the oligarch, but he's different. He's a
Hmm.
multi-billionaire, and he's a different character. So I will introduce new characters, but in essence, uh, Hattie and Wolf will be thrust into without a choice to go after this guy, even though they haven't slept for a week. It's like, so what? You're Rangers. Get a
So,
grip.
so the reader gets to catch their breath, but the characters don't.
Yes,
Okay.
right.
No, that's fantastic. I'd like to wrap things up by asking guests. So, what advice do you have for writers? I mean, someone says, Dr. Farmer, I want to write a military espionage thriller. Where should I start? You do it because you were saying that you write stuff that you would want to read, and my thing is, I tell writers write something you would want to watch. So, is that something you would
Yes.
really kind of like, what kind of stories do you like? Write that, but put your own spin on it.
I think that the writer has to find something. It was Steinbeck, not Steinbeck. It was oh him Steinbeck, who once created a whole story first with a girl sitting on the limb of a tree. It it struck him like lightning. This girl sitting on the limb of a tree. And from that, we have a novel that is Steinbeck. You have to be ready and willing to catch the wind, um, where you're ready and waiting for the inspiration, ready and waiting. You're reading, you have things that you read that really you like. You like going towards certain literature. And then you start going, wait a minute, I could write that,
Hmm.
or I could write it, but this is how I would do it. So if you're a writer out there, you have to ask, what is it that excites my soul? Is it just pure the drama? Is it the Hemingway, the perfect sentence? Is it, only Hemingway can do things that, you know, is it what is it that when you read just grips you? Take that and ask yourself, hey, wait a minute. I could write something. I could add to the creative reservoir or treasury of this planet, of the human race. It's a little bit of sand amongst all the others, but this would be my little notch in the
Hmm.
tree. I could do that with this character. And so you've got this, I could do this. I can make a Jason board. Well, how would you make, what would you do? And so that's how you start. You just sit down and go, let's just start with the first couple words.
Hmm.
What does it, and you create these backstories and all these pages that will never be used,
Hmm.
but come to create characters that are living in you. And then suddenly you start writing about them and something starts spilling onto the page and you're going, hey, that's kind of good. Then you give it to an editor and they go, that, yeah, yeah, forget it, buddy. But you've got the right idea. Stay with it. So that's what I would say. That's the craft, is what grips you, what compels you when you're reading. So, right now I know people can't see, but I'm in my little library. So this is, you can see that it's just, you know,
Books and books and books.
books and books and books and books and art and art and art and art. And uh I've been a voracious reader since forever.
Hmm.
And so I've read lots of military history. I taught history in college. And when you get into military history, there are these themes that are so amazing. Um, one of George Washington's greatest victories happened when the British were attacking. I think it was General Greene, and he was in retreat. Washington is another place entirely. half a mile away in the trees and waiting. And the guy with the information, the messenger, stumbles into camp accidentally and says, hands in the message. Washington looks at it and goes, my gosh. And he gets on his horse with everyone else, goes into battle, finds Green in retreat, and says, what in the H are you doing? And he turns everyone around, and there's a great victory that was a turning point. Well, I love that. That's the stuff that's real.
Hmm.
So you say, wait a minute, I can write a story that has that twist, you know? It's not Macbeth, but in Lear, King Lear starts off with the guy that knows it all. He ends up blinded. He scratches his eyes out. You're going, wow, how did that happen? In Macbeth, you've got the witches over the cauldron. You're going, how does that figure? But they tell you the story, what's going to happen to Macbeth, and he pulls it off. And so that's what excites me about the creative process. Find what it is that grips you, that you enjoy reading, and say, hey, I can do that. And look what Shakespeare did in 5 pages. Look what, look at all of these changes. I can do that and make it fun to read and
Hmm.
exciting to read. Yeah.
Yeah, because I've often said that you can tell when the writer enjoyed writing it because it's a fun read that it really
Yeah.
it grips the reader and it you makes you want to turn the page to see what happens next.
Yes.
Okay. Oh,
I,
Dr.
my
Bruce.
little
Oh,
my little theme was give the reader a reason to turn the page.
hmm. Oh, very much so. Dr. Bruce Farmer, this has been a fantastic conversation. So, where is there anywhere people can find you online to find out more?
Well, I have a web page. It's drbrucefarmer.com,
Okay.
and we've received you know, some honors and awards, which you're always like, what? They did what? How is that possible? But anyway, and then just Amazon has you just put in Blood Sapphire's Revenge, or
That
you
would be
can put
this book right here.
yeah,
Blood is it?
Blood Sapphire's Revenge, and boom, we have it in hard copy, soft, and
Sure.
Kindle. And I did the Audible,
Oh,
so you can listen to Audible, and yeah, it's me.
no, fantastic. Are you on any social media platforms, or is it just the
I
website?
I am. There's a kind of a bit of I am not good at social media. I mean,
Okay.
it's a medium that is foreign to me. So what I have done recently is I've actually hired a social media guru,
Okay.
and she is actually starting to create content, and it's posting stuff, and I'm going, Taylor, that's amazing. How did you do that? She said, well, this is what I do.
Ah,
Yeah, so she's Instagram and Facebook are the big ones.
okay.
And it right now it's all I can say is that we're just going to get gangbusters on that. And then the big thing that we haven't talked about is there's a screenplay.
Ah, of course.
Um, and we're finishing the pitch deck right now. And we have an award-winning screenwriter who will be making the pitch himself. Um, he's been in the business 38 years. He was a top guy at Disney and all the studios. He says, I will take the pitch deck and the screenplay. And yes, I know people. So
Always a good thing to hear.
yeah, so we expect this to be a series.
Oh,
Uh,
that all right. Well, fingers crossed for you.
yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay, so it is drbrucefarmer.com, and of course the book again is Blood Sapphire's Revenge. You can get it at his site, drbrucefarmer.com, and on Amazon. Dr. Farmer, thank you once again for being here today. Audience, if you've enjoyed today's podcast, please hit like and subscribe. Leave a comment. Tell your friends. You can check out my screenwriting blog, MaximumZ, at maximumz.blog. I'm on Twitter at maximum_Z, and this show itself has its own Twitter account at podcastcwl. And I also have an Instagram account at Pez Screenwriting, Pez. Also, you can check out my books, the Go Ahead and Ask series on Amazon, books about screenwriting and pie, two wonderful things. Like I said, that is Dr. Bruce Farmer. I'm Paul. This has been the Creative Writing Life
Thank you.
podcast.
Thank you
Thanks for
so much.
listening. Stay safe, stay healthy. Most importantly, go write something.